Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast, where we empower women to own their power, create influence and impact, and live life unapologetically AF. It's time to leverage your expertise, resources, and relationships to build your business, brand, and badassery. So just click subscribe and let's get it. I'm your host, Kelly Charles Collins. Welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast. Today, my guest is attorney LeTonya F. Moore. She's a business growth strategist, attorney, author, and serial entrepreneur. She works with emerging industries to overcome red tape, financial and operational barriers to achieve an unparalleled advantage and accelerated path to business growth and success. She's an expert in brand positioning, intellectual property, house counsel services, investor fundraising, business strategic growth, operations efficiency, brand, and asset protection. In a word, she's a badass. LeTonya is based in Houston, Texas, and she has an international client base. LeTonya, welcome to the Ladies Who Leverage podcast.
Thank you for having me, Kelly.
Now, that was a mouthful, right? And like I said, in a word, a badass. So I want to break some of that stuff down. Now, one thing that you and I have in common is that we're attorneys. And I don't know about you, but my journey to being an attorney was not a lifelong dream. So what about you? Like, how did you end up being an attorney?
Yeah, it's funny. It was not a lifelong dream, necessarily for me. When I was younger, it was something that I kind of flirted with, talked about, but I really wanted to be like a news anchor, like an Anderson Cooper. Like that was my big dream. But then, life happens and I got pregnant with my son at 17. And so, at the time I was interning at the local television station. All of the reporters and different people, were, encouraging me to go into media. But, they also let me know how hard of a road it was because now, we're talking 30 years ago. Oh my God. But we're talking like 30 years ago, right? So almost 30 years ago. And so it was a difficult road. And they were honest about that. And so kind of with that backdrop, I said, okay, I'm going to have to probably get into something that's going to allow me to really make money probably out of the gate, right? Better than this. And so that's really when I started to refocus. And I started really seriously considering law school.
Yeah. So many of our stories come with having had children young, right? I had a child when I was 21, not as young as you, but what was that like for you to be in this space, right, in journalism where it is that you want to be, and then you find out that you're pregnant at 17? What was that decision-making process for you in terms of keeping, not keeping, and moving forward? How do you move forward?
It's so funny because it was just like utter fear. Like, I don't think I have ever been that afraid in my life. And it wasn't necessarily afraid of like, what are my parents going to do? It was more so like, what are they going to think? Because at the time, like no one in my family, I grew up around my father's side, primarily. So nobody on that side of the family had like gone to college or, anything like that, or like, they had not completed college, so it was one of those situations where it's like, like, girl, like you like might really have a shot. And then this, right? So that was kind of the backdrop of what I was thinking about. And so I just didn't say anything for a long time. Like when I say a long time, like I just didn't say anything. And it's like, and now I think about it, I'm like, I was so stupid, right? Like, what was I thinking? Like, was it going to go away? Like, what was going to happen? And finally, I told my sister. And she was like, what? I was like, yes. And so I knew, I kept up with it, you know what I mean? So I knew like how far along I was and things like that. And so she was like, you have got to tell mama. And I was just like, do I? And so anyway, she actually told my mom, right? And then my mother called me. By the time, my mom called, like I was at my internship or whatever, because I would leave school, and go there. And she called me and she was like, come. I was like, hello. And she was like, come straight home. It was just like, oh my God.
Like,
what now? Yeah, it's like I did not know what to think, and like any parent in that situation, my mother, it's funny because what I really didn't know how they were going to react. I thought my father was definitely going to be like a lot more like angry and animated, and he was nothing like that. Now my mom, angry and animated, right? And I'm saying that because their personalities are opposite. Like my mom is very like mild mannered, my dad is very like boisterous, so I just assumed like, okay, this is how it's going to be. And I think it was worse that it was opposite. Like I really wanted my father to say something and he didn't. And I really wanted my mom to like be quiet and she wouldn't, right? And so, my mother really, wanted me to make a different decision. Like she was very adamant, like, you can always have children. Like, like you really, like you really can. And I think you need to like consider it. And it was tough, but it just wasn't something that I could go through with. And so now, I have one child, and that's him. And, he's grown, he's an adult, doing great. He's in the IT field, living his life. So, but it was tough. It was very, very tough. Very, very tough.
I love having these conversations because even though, you and I have spent some time together, we've actually never met in person, but we've communicated over this past year. And a lot of things about people, but you don't know their backstories. And our backstories are very similar in that way, in that thank God for these sisters, that we have, because when I got pregnant, I told my sister, and my sister had to tell my parents. Because I was like, yeah, not doing that, right? And so I love having these conversations because so many women who are in our position in terms of, being high achievers, having gone on to achieve so many great things, our backstories are really important for people to understand that it wasn't easy, right? And the decisions that we had to make. And so when you make this decision that you are going to be, I call it, not or and, right? That I was going to have my baby and I was going to, at the time, get my master's degree. After you make this decision at 17 years old, how do you then get on the path to, going to college and finishing college and then going into law school? Talk to us about that.
Yeah. So, enter my sister again, right? Because I really, in my mind, just said, there's some good like local colleges, because I was at a point that like I was already applying for schools. Like I was in my junior year, so I was already applying for schools. Like, honestly, by the time my parents found out, I had already started receiving acceptance letters. So college was like a lock. Like they knew I was, definitely going to be going somewhere. And so I just kind of resigned myself and I said, well, I can just go to a local college. Like I was just thinking like, I don't have to sacrifice college. I just got to, maybe do something differently. And so like one day, I get home and my sister's there. And to put it in context, my sister is 4.5 years older, and she had a daughter a year earlier. Okay. So there's already like one baby, like there in the house with us. And so she then kind of orchestrates this family meeting where, my parents just said, look, you're not going to have to not go to college. Like, I didn't say anything to them, I just didn't want to talk to them. I was trying to hide, but it was like, you don't have to not go to college. but you have to go, like, you can't go more than 4 hours away. So like Howard was off the table. Like some of the colleges that I was just like, yes, it's like dream school. Yeah, they were just way too far, from Huntsville, Alabama, right? So it was like, okay, you can't go more than 4 hours away. You're gonna have to call every single day. Like you're not gonna miss a day. Like they just kind of said, you are gonna be as present as possible, right? We want you to, like, you're gonna come home like 2 weekends a month, if you decide to go away. So although my choices were limited, it was a good limitation. They were like, you're still going to be present, and be a parent. Like this is not drop your baby off and go live your life. And, and I mean, and, like I said, like this was kind of like what my sister was kind of, really like orchestrating or whatever. She was really orchestrating. My mom was like, okay. And, and I will never forget, like my father, he looked at me and he said, I just want you to do one thing. He said, don't bring another one. That was it. Don't bring another baby. So I'm like, I could do that, right? Like I could meet all of this criteria. And so that's what we did.
Yeah. And I love that you said, you didn't have to sacrifice, you just had to do it differently. Right? Because oftentimes we think that we have to give up everything. It has to be that or, but I love that your family was willing to say, to go with you and say, no, you're going to go to college. We just have to do it differently. Maybe the dream, like you said, of going to Howard or something like that could not come to fruition, but the college dream can come. And I think that's so important as we go through our journeys in life. I always say, I call it taking the detour, right? Because I understand that life is not linear. And sometimes you just have to take the detour. It doesn't mean that it's bad. It doesn't mean that you're not going to be successful. You're just going to do it differently. So you finish college, you go off to law school. Where'd you go to law school?
University of Alabama.
Okay. And when you went there, so we read all this stuff about you with business strategists and overcoming red tape and all of that stuff. Is that what you intended to do when you went to law school, or this is a whole new journey?
Oh, it's a whole new journey. When I went to law school, like a lot of us, we're very limited in our understanding of what it means to be a lawyer, right? We think about, litigation, we think about criminal law, we think about personal injury, we don't think about all of the other things because quite frankly, we probably have not been exposed. Mm-hmm. For me, it's just, it was like all these things were just orchestrated. As a law student, I got the opportunity to be on a panel with the regional director of housing and urban development. At the time, he was the regional director of housing and urban development, fair housing. So we are on this panel. I was representing a law student's perspective because I was the president of Black Law Student Association. And they just literally were like, would you like to, represent the school? I was like, yeah, anyway.
I'm a journalist.
Yeah, I was like, of course. And so I get there, we're on this panel. It was fabulous. The regional director afterwards, he said, do you already have, no, he said, what are your plans for this summer? Right. I said, well, I'm still, securing employment. I was like, but I'm going to Mexico. It's, he was like, Mexico. And so I was like, oh yeah. And I was telling him why I was going to be in Mexico. And I said, but yeah, the rest of the summer, I'll just get a job. Right. And he started laughing, like he was laughing hysterically. And he said, okay. He said, well, this is what I want you to do. He said, when you get back to school, send me your resume. Here's my card. And I said, wait a second, right? And I had my resume actually in my portfolio and I handed it to him and he cracked up. He said, thank you, but still send it to me so my assistant can have it. And he was cracking up. So he said, and also let me know when you're going to be in Mexico and when you're going to be back. So I said, okay. When I tell you, I thought nothing of this. Get back to a computer because no smartphones at the time. Right. So I sent him my resume, and let's say that this was a Friday. Monday morning, they made me an internship offer for like to start the week after I returned from Mexico. He didn't talk to me about the job. Like, I had no idea he was even thinking about that. I thought he just wanted more information. And that was how I got my job, like my, what is that, second year.
Mm-hmm.
So that was how I got my job for the second year. Like, I went there, I spent most of the summer, working there. And then after law school, I actually ended up getting hired, a direct hire into the government, which I found out later doesn't typically happen. Like, they typically do not hire law students. So I have been incredibly blessed
Mm-hmm.
and so fortunate. But I say all that to say that that's where I started learning about so many different areas. Because when you work for the government, you're touching all sorts of things. And I was the one that I always wanted to learn about something. And so anytime they put something out there, I was raising my hand like, oh yeah, I want to go to that training. Oh yeah, I want to know about that. And I started to learn what I really liked, what I didn't like. And I soon realized that I was very, very good at creating strategies.
Mm-hmm.
I learned that very, very early. And so by the time I was, I guess you would say, mid-career with the government, this is sort of like that thing I was known for, right? When people had like very tough situations. At the time, I was doing primarily doing labor and employment defense, a lot of regulatory work. And so I was like the person that people would call and say, hey, can I bounce this off of you? Like, what do you think? What are some strategies and things like that? So I realized like very early, like, okay, I'm really good at this and I enjoy it. And so I started to make sure that I was positioning myself to get as much, free training as I could to hone those skills.
Yeah. And in that story, I hear two lessons, at least two lessons. There's probably more, but at least two lessons. One was when you said yes, right? So when they asked you for balsa and you were just like, yeah, sure. Don't really know what it is, but yes, I'm going to show up, right? So that was one thing. And then the second is what you just talked about, and just whatever the free training is, yes, I'm going, right? Even if we don't think that that's something that we're really interested in at the moment, or, oh, how is that going to help me? Go. Put yourself in those spaces to learn and also to meet people. So now you are like an international phenom, I'll say. And, you do a lot of stuff with business. And you and I talk about this often about, being a retired attorney or retiring from the practice of law. Where is your business now? So I know that you started out, in government, but where are you now in terms of how you work with, your clients, and what are you focused on?
Yeah, so now I'm really excited because it's a new phase. It's not really a transition, it's just a new phase. And where I'm headed now is actually, the goal is being a strategic business partner with companies, right? Because I realized that, merging my legal experience when I was with the government, I mean, I was working with presidential appointees, I was working with SCSers and, other like C-suite equivalents. And so I realized like, well, this is a great transferable skill because I also have a regulatory background. But also having been attached to an actual facility, it was sort of like, now you're in-house counsel for this hospital system. So there were so many different things that I had to learn as far as that goes. So basically what I've done is package that, right? What I learned in compliance, what I learned with government oversight, what I learned in terms of ethics, what I learned in terms of, again, government regulation, labor and employment, anything that you could think of, right? And I've now decided to package that and now offer that to direct clients that I service. And so they tend to be, or, our targets are mid-market clients, right? That we can come and again, become a business partner with them. So, some people want house counsel services. Some people actually would rather you be more in a consultancy type of capacity where you can actually say, okay, this is the move, right? And really lead some or influence some decision making. That is really the goal, right? To really get squarely into that. And so that's where we're headed right now.
I think one of the great things about being a lawyer is the leverage, right? Because we learn so many skills. Obviously, I think, in law school, they teach us how to think. They don't teach you how to be a lawyer, right?
Right.
They really do teach us how to think and how to analyze information. And as we, start to look at different entrepreneurial ventures, or how do I stop billing hours, right? How do I do this differently, like you said earlier? Being a lawyer, having a law degree gives you so much leverage to be able to go out and do all of these other things. And like you said, house counsel. And for those who don't know, like, house counsel is in-house counsel. That's how you're referring to it, LeTonya? So in-house counsel, you are the attorney for the company. They're inside attorney. And there's so many things that you can do. And before, it used to be, as a lawyer, we all had to be in somebody's office and at a desk. And now we can just do it, anywhere and anyhow, right? We can really leverage it. And so what is next for LeTonya in terms of business? What do you want? What is your vision?
Yeah, absolutely. Now that I am clear, right, on where this is going, uh, I really want to really just focus on some smaller industries as far as that goes. And when I say smaller industries, more in terms of the number of industries that we look at. So we've been targeting smart technology, cannabis industry, alcohol, and food and beverage, also cosmetics industry. And part of the reasoning for that is that this is where the world is going, right? We're also doing something in the affordable housing sector because at the end of the day, housing is a critical problem throughout the world, not just, throughout the nation. And so one of the things that I said, in next phase of the business is that, I want our company to be squarely involved in industries that are going to have a long-standing impact. Right. And so again, a lot of these emerging industries, this is where we're going. And they also, cross each other, right? They also intersect. Smart technology is being used across every sector essentially in the world. Anything that you can think of, they're trying to figure out a better technology that's going to help them deliver service faster or be more efficient and all of these things. So that's not going anywhere. And I think even with cannabis, right, like there's a lot going on, and realistically, I think we're getting back to, food and plants actually being medicine versus, something manufactured. And so I can definitely see this going in lots of positive directions as we're seeing, things growing, right? And this is why we've made the choices. So for us, that's where I'm pushing the company in that direction for the foreseeable future.
And when you're working with those industries, I know a lot of it is around brand positioning and making sure that they are standing out. How do you talk to us about brand positioning, what that means and why that's so important for businesses?
Yeah, absolutely. Especially smaller businesses. One of my mantras is, positioning yourself as the obvious choice. I think that when you understand that if you're the obvious choice, it really doesn't matter who else is in the market, right? It really doesn't matter who else is doing even essentially an identical service as you, because you have set yourself apart as this is the selection you should make if you want quality, right? And you have to build being the obvious choice around your own internal pillars, right? Like for us, we're really big on honesty, integrity, things like that. The other person it might not be their pillars, right? It may be something else. But it's very important because people don't think in terms of companies. They think in terms of pleasure and pain, right? If I have a headache, what's going to make that go away, right? And depending on the type of person I am, if I don't take medication, I'm going to be thinking possibly about cannabis, right? Because I may want to plant. But if I take medication, now I may be thinking about, a certain pain medication, one versus the other. There's going to be a reason why you choose one over the other, right? That is the obvious choice for the market. Those are the principles and the things that we like to help our clients get to, because you want to know what other people in the industry are doing. But when you're so focused on competition, 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 what happens is you take your eye off the ball and what you're doing. It's almost like driving, always looking in the rear view or the side view mirror. At some point, you're going to miss something in front of you and you're going to have an accident. And so this is why brand positioning is so important. The other thing that's important is fundraising, right? Making sure that you have the capital, right? Having access to capital is not just fundraising, but it's also having access to capital. Those are the top two. And then the third would be your operations, making sure that you are able to deliver service in a quality manner to your customer every single time.
Yeah. And those things are not mutually exclusive, right? Because they really feed off of each other, right? When we're talking about fundraising and we're talking about branding. And oftentimes we talk about branding in terms of business, but branding is also personal, right? So how do you talk to your clients about that, about creating their personal brand also creating their company brand?
Yeah, it really depends, because there are a lot of company founders that don't want you to know who they are. Their personal brand for them is being able to go to their kids' soccer games and not have anybody trying to pitch, them for something, right? So everybody doesn't want to be known. They just don't want to be known. And so when that is the case, though, there is still a personal responsibility, right? You don't want to be the person calling somebody for walking their, dog or whatever, right? Like you definitely don't want to do that, because now there can still be some backlash to your company. So then we're talking to them around things about like personal accountability, right? What are the companies that you are supporting? Where are you spending your time, right? Who are you affiliated with? And does that go against the image of your company? And if it does go against the image of your company, then you have to think about and be prepared for the impact. Now, for people that are looking at building a personal brand, one of the things that I always caution them about is that, so what happens when there is no you, right? Is your company brand strong enough to continue, if this is their goal, to continue when you are no longer here? And that doesn't necessarily mean death. Like, it could just mean you decided you're going to retire and you're going to turn the reins over to somebody else. What does that look like, next phase? And so there's some pros and cons to personal branding when you're talking about building a big company, right? If you are the company and you are the brand and you are the face, then, that's something that, is just kind of going hand in hand with building the company.
Yeah, that's a great distinction, because I didn't think about that in terms of when I was asking you the question, but that is a great distinction, because if you are scaling, right, possibly to maybe sell the business, you don't want to build yourself so much into it that people will only want to deal with the company if it's you, right? And I think that that's a good lesson for us to learn. So I know that we started off with your journalistic journey and kind of got sidetracked and got to the law, but I know that you haven't given up really on those journalistic dreams, because one of the first kind of discussions that we had, you did a round table with a bunch of women, and you've continued to kind of bring women together to have these conversations around issues that matter. And so, is there something in the background, LeTonya, where you are going to also venture off into that vision again of, doing something as it relates to journalism?
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, that thing that, you never did, right? And I'm thinking about it. I haven't quite decided what that's going to look like. I've tried some things in the past. I've done some, you may not know this, but I had a live stream that we used to do, myself and Mario Brown. We would do a live stream every Tuesday night for like almost 2 years.
Oh, wow.
Right. And it was fun. It was, we talked about different things, but, relationships was always that thing that, anytime a man is around, a woman wants to know, right? I did that. I've had a couple of podcasts that did okay, so it definitely is there. I just have to decide, what will that look like? As you know, I love hosting like forums and panels. I sit on them, but I actually enjoy hosting better. Mm-hmm. And I know some people like to just be on panels, but I like to host it because I think, steering the conversation is just very gratifying. And so it's definitely something that is on the radar, but I haven't just fleshed it out yet.
Yeah, I'm like you. I like facilitating the conversations. It's and just listening to what people are saying and trying to pull, the threads, and also listening to what people are not saying, right? And then helping them to get there. So as we come to a close, LeTonya, if some young woman or young girl said to you, LeTonya, if you could tell your 17-year-old self one thing, what would it have been?
Run from my baby daddy.
Hey.
Run, girl, run. Seriously. Seriously, what I would tell her is, just because there's a misstep, it doesn't mean that you can't follow your original dream. I think that for me, it's not a regret because I have so much more, right? And what I have now is just as valuable. But I think that it is something that has been a non-attained goal that was easily attainable. And so just know that you can do whatever's in your heart. You don't have to compromise, right? You may have to adjust, you may have to pivot, but you don't have to compromise.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, LeTonya. I loved having this conversation with you, and thanks for sharing your journey. I think it's so important as we go along to share our journeys, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And in Ladies Who Leverage, that's exactly what we do so that we can support each other, uplift each other, push each other, and make sure that we are being the best that we can be, and so that we can unleash our badassery and live life unapologetically AF. Thanks for joining us. This podcast is brought to you by Lady Lawyer Media. If you're a badass woman who's ready to take action to live life unapologetically AF, then you need to join our global community on Facebook, Ladies Who Leverage. And remember to subscribe to our podcast. And until next time, let's collabosource, strategize, and monetize.